Like he said, we historians, we never do drugs. We don't understand drugs. We missed this, So he was very clear that we missed this. And he said this is actually the missing link that historians did not have, especially to explain Hitler's degeneration as a leader. Like he made very good decisions, good in meaning militarily effective decisions in the beginning of the war, and very bad decisions for the German war effort towards the end. And you can link that to drugs. You can explain a lot of Hitler through the drugs, but you can also look at this point that historians so far had not been able to figure out, basically, what happened to Hitler. Why did he get crazy? And I mean, he was crazy, but why did he get so bad as a leader? Because he was very effective for a long time, and then there's this moment where it turns.
Yeah, the degeneration of decision making, psychology, behavior, all of that. You cannot understand that fully without understanding his drug use. And we should also say that some of the historians you mentioned, Ian Kershaw and Antony Beevor, these legends of history, they all gave you compliments. So Kershaw said that your work is very good, extremely interesting, and a serious piece of well-researched history. Antony Beevor said that it's a remarkable work of research. So props to them. You have received a bunch of criticism from historians, but you've also received, obviously, a lot of props. I mean, Kershaw's the legendary historian of Hitler complimenting how deep your work is. That must feel good. Maybe this is a good moment to also just, since we're talking about historians, to address some of the criticism. So Richard Evans has been also a great historian, has been one of the bigger critics. He said that your work is crass and dangerously inaccurate account and is morally and politically dangerous. I think that's grounded in the idea that if you say that, well, all the Nazi forces and Hitler was on drugs, so therefore they're not really evil. It's just accountability can be removed because they were using drugs.
Right.
And also another criticism of his, which I also understand and probably can steal, man, is if you look too much through this singular lens of drugs, you can overemphasize it. You can overemphasize how important it was as an explainer of the effectiveness of Blitzkrieg, for example. Because there is some, I mean, I should say, there is something really compelling about a singular theory that explains everything, and you can fall in love with it too much as an explainer. So can you steel man his criticism or criticism you received and also argue against it?
I think he's absolutely right that you shouldn't argue in a monocausal way. And this is actually what Mommsen also said to me, because of course I was enthusiastic about all my drug findings. And he said, don't argue in a monocausal way, especially the war.
There's a lot of variables, a lot of factors, a lot of things going on, yes.
So that sentence of his, don't argue in a monocausal way, that always stayed with me. And I think that I didn't deviate from that path, actually. But it was still interesting that Evans thought that I put too much emphasis on the drugs. I think it's a totally fine, opinion. I would disagree. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written the book. What I can state here is that I invented nothing. In all of my 3 nonfiction books, nothing is invented. If you are a good writer, and I trained as a novelist, for me it was also very unusual to write a nonfiction book. I wanted to write a novel about Nazis and drugs. My publisher said, no, he looked at the facts. He said, someone has to write the facts. So I said, but the nonfiction books are boring. He said, not necessarily. Maybe you can find a way to write it with your novelistic style, but based 100% on the facts. And that is like, in German we say Spagat. How do you say that? Split, like when you do with your legs, like it's hard,
Yeah.
Because with a very fluent, sophisticated language, you can easily overpower the reader. If I describe how the German guys, 19-year-old guys, took the meth and went into the tank, and the meth started kicking in. 5 guys on meth after like 1 hour of ride into France. You can write that in a powerful way that if you are the reader, you would think, yeah, I mean, the Blitzkrieg without meth is unthinkable.
There is a bit of a, man, I wish I found that kind of feeling for historians, right? Like, how did I miss this piece? So some historians, like great historians like Kershaw, obviously, see, they kind of give you a like a slow clap, applaud. And some historians are a little bit skeptical, like this is a little too good. So totally understandable. And
Also, they have a different techniques to write text like this. I used a totally different technique. And I have an apparatus, so it really feels like it could be an academic work, but still it's written in a way that it kind of overpowers. It kind of colonializes the story in a weird way. I never thought about it like that. But while I was writing it, I was just trying to write it as well as I could. I didn't think about these questions we're talking about now.
yes.
I got carried away, obviously, but I never left the area of facts.
Yes. So we should talk about your process. That's also super fascinating. You went to the archives. You went to the sources. What's that take? What does it feel? What does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it entail? How much text is there? What language is it in? What's the process there?
I never thought of going to the archives, and my girlfriend at the time, she said, you have to go to the archives. And she's an academic, so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go. I'm fine. I'll check it out. And then when I met a historian, he claims that without methamphetamine, there would be no Blitzkrieg victory of Germany. Like, he's monocausal.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also extremely helpful to me, and he's an academic. He gave me the signatures, it's called in German, where you find stuff in the archives. Signature is like, then it says like H2/538, something like this. And these were the files of Professor Ranke. And Professor Ranke was the head of the Institute for Army Physiology. His job was to improve the performance of the soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his stuff was filed in a certain place in the military archives, which in Germany is in Freiburg in the south, in a small town, not in Berlin, because Germany is a bit of a decentralized country. We don't want to put everything into Berlin again like the Nazis did. We try to avoid our mistakes. So the military archive is in Freiburg, and I went there. And because I had this signature, immediately I got, original documents that were all relating to my research. Like, I could read I had the original.
What does it look like? Is it sheets of paper?
Yeah, it's
so it's not scanned.
It's different things. Like, the guy who did the meth into the army, the Professor Ranke,
mm-hmm.
He was writing a war diary. That's what the name was, war diary. So every day he would write it by hand. So this war diary was given to me.
So you're reading that.
Yeah,
so it's like dated, like you have a date.
Yeah.
The diary.
It was a bit funny with him because he took a lot of meth himself because he thought it was great. He just thought it increases your performance. By now we know a little bit more that methamphetamine is not so healthy because you get used to it and you burn out. You get depressed and then you have to take more. Big problem. And he became depressed and burned out, and he didn't realize it's because of the meth that he's like describing to the whole German army. Like, he made a convincing case, and I can explain that in detail how that actually happened. But just to have his war diary was great. And then also, like, he would type letters writing to the company of Temmler how fast they could produce stuff in which time. So you have all these original documents. You have like 500 documents, and it goes like, he writes like reports what happened in this battle on methamphetamine. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can find in the archives if you find them. But the tricky thing is that you can only you kind of look at a so-called find book. In the find book, you cannot type in drugs. It wouldn't find anything because at the time when they were taking all the notes from this doctor, his war diary, everything. They didn't put the label drugs there. They put the label, his name, his position, World War II, French campaign, stuff like that. So because at the time they didn't know that I would at one point come and look for drugs in that, but he was the drug guy. But also they didn't realize he was the drug guy. No one realized that he was the drug guy. So it's not easy to find stuff in the archives. So the archives, you go, it's a Kafkaesque experience. You go into this building and you have to understand the rules, and you will never fully understand what's going on. Also, the archivists, they don't really know what's going on because there's so many documents. No one's read them all. No one knows. Like there's history kind of lying there, somehow organized, somehow stored.
I mean, it does sound like a very Kafkaesque thing.
But it's great if you find something. But you can also sit there for a week and not find anything.
So what was the process for you? You're just reading open-minded, trying to see, is there some truth here to be discovered?
Well, I have a friend, he's a DJ, and we talked about Berlin. We'll probably talk about it more. And he takes a lot of drugs. And he knows let's put it that way, he knows his drugs. And one day he said to me, when I was trying to figure out what I would write about next, he said, the Nazis took a lot of drugs, you should write about that. And I said, the Nazis didn't take drugs. Because, when you grow up in Germany, you get educated about the Nazis quite intensely, especially in West Germany. Like they teach you everything, but they don't teach you drugs. I mean, now they do, maybe, but it was not known. So, and the Nazis always had this aura of being law and order, no drugs, of course, no chaos, everything. My grandfather, he was a Nazi, always said, well, at least there was discipline in the country, there was law and order. So this doesn't match with drugs,
I should also say, I think that's the experience for a lot of people. Before reading your book, I had the same kind of feeling that the Nazi ideology was all about like law and order and purity, and surely they would not be doing drugs. So this really blew my mind. I think I wasn't quite ready. Similar to like Richard Evans, like this is a big a narrative transforming into a deeper, more complicated understanding what Nazi forces and the Hitler Inner Circle actually look like.
That's why I didn't believe Alex.
Always take the DJ, the drug expert, with a grain of salt.
I didn't believe him, but I said it's a great topic. Maybe I could invent it. He said, no, you don't invent this. This is real. I said, how do you know? And he said, I have a friend and I know this guy by now. I met him. He's an antique dealer in Berlin, and he had bought an old medicine chest in an old Berlin apartment. This was in 2010. And he found Pervitin tablets inside, which were the methamphetamine product that was marketed in Germany in the late 30s. And this guy, the antique dealer, took some tablets, and they were quite old, 70 years old, but they still had an effect on him. And I later asked him, and he said, well, we took them for about a month. It was the greatest month we ever had. Like, we had so much fun. We were so productive. Yeah. Because that methamphetamine back then was also like a quality product. It was not crystal meth made in a trailer lab.
So this is many decades later.
They were still potent.
They were still potent.
Especially Alex convinced me, because Alex has a high tolerance. And he said, okay, they still had some. So I said to him, can I have some also? And I took one. And he's like, we were standing in my writing tower, which is at the river in Berlin. And he was like, I took one. And I could feel something. Then I took another one. And then it's, I could feel more. And then I took a third one. It's like typical Alex. He would like take three, instead of just taking one. He took 3 methamphetamine tablets from the 40s. And he said, and then I felt like, and he looked at the river, and there was a big ship, like a cargo ship going by. And he said, I felt like this ship, suddenly there was a Schub, he said in German, like a motion that was like energy that was grabbing me. And I felt so powerful. And he told me this, and I was like, wow, this is like, and I Googled like methamphetamine, Nazi Germany. This was in 2010. And there was this one professor at the university in Ulm who said the Blitzkrieg was only possible because of methamphetamine. So I called up this guy, and he said, sure, I'll meet you. And then he gave me the signature for the archive. And then I went to the archive, and then I really started to do my own research. And then I went to different archives and I tried to find everything on Nazis and drugs. And that came, everything is in the book. So that crazy meeting with Alex in my writing tower, that kind of got me on this research journey.
It makes me wonder what other mysteries like that are in the archives. Do you think there's stuff like that in there that we deeply don't understand? About, for example, there's a bunch of mysteries that we think we understand. Maybe about the concentration camps, maybe about the Eastern Front, the interplay between Stalin and Hitler, maybe about Britain, that could be discovered in the letters, in the data that were completely missing.
I think so, and I think that also there are archives that are not open. Let's say the Vatican archive, some secret archives that some very powerful structures have, structures that we might not even know, now off the top of our head, which still have a huge influence. So I think that the human history is quite different from what most historians write. I think that's just one version. I think there's several versions. And I think that it goes much deeper and is much more interesting. And so, yes, this history is a very active thing, which I also didn't know. I was writing a historical nonfiction book, and I suddenly realized that this is like a shark pool, because the history defines the future or is very connected. Our history teacher always said, if we don't know where we come from, we cannot know where we go. And that is, I think, true. That is what I now really am interested in for my next book. I'm trying to really understand human history. And obviously, I'm not the first. There's a few, alternative historians that go because you have to go back in time quite a bit. And then it's not easy to write about it, but it's very interesting to think about it. And I would love to find the truth on Atlantis, which I don't believe in, actually. And we can also talk about that. But maybe there's an archive where we can actually see that they had this king ruling. I don't think this could be found, but I think we can still also find a lot of documents, but I think especially in closed archives. So we won't find them.
You said a lot of really interesting things. It's so important to have people like you that do the daring work of going to the archives of the sources, the evidence, and trying to find a thing that completely transforms history as we thought we understood it. That's revisionist history at its best. There's revisionist history has a sort of negative connotation sometimes because you go to conspiratorial land without much evidence and you're just being a rebel for rebel's sake. But when you ground it in data and dare to challenge the historical narrative, that's really powerful. So